Is all of this just reaction? Is it still this big hangover from Trump being elected?
Partly. I mean, I'm sure there's a frustration about it. Trump, I suppose, was the start of it, wasn't it? And because people just decided that he was a fascist, because they didn't really know what fascist meant. He said a lot of stuff that I find contemptible, and a lot of stuff that I think you would be hard pushed. I think when he talked about Ilhan Omar and the squad, and said send them home, or they should just go home. I mean, 3 of the 4 were born in America, and the 4th is a US citizen anyway, right? It's difficult for me to see how that can be interpreted as anything other than a racist trope, actually. But this does not necessarily mean he's a white supremacist. That's a massive leap to make. Again, I'd need the evidence on it. But yeah, I think that's the problem, is that there's a sense of frustration. People were angry, understandably so. It's not nice to lose, is it? And it's easier if you can then paint everyone who made that thing happen as evil. If you say that everyone who voted for Trump is as deplorable as Hillary Clinton so memorably did, and that worked out really well for her, didn't it? Then of course you go on the offensive and you end up guaranteeing Trump's victory in 2020. That's what you do. That's what they've done.
What would you predict?
Well, he's definitely going to win.
You reckon?
Yeah. I mean, he's playing a very smart game, because he's putting the squad, the 4 Democrat politicians who play identity politics all the time. So Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley and Rashida Tlaib, who are never going to play well with the electorate, because they're always going on about grievance and intersectionality and white privilege and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't win votes. Never has, never will. And what Trump is doing is he constantly talks about them to make them the face of the Democrat Party. So people like Nancy Pelosi,
giving them enough rope.
Yeah. People like Pelosi are hating this. Like she wants to distance herself from these 4. But when you think Democrat, now you think uber woke, crazy identitarians, right? And that's largely because of Trump and because of the way he puts them at the center. So it's a smart, tactical move. The Democrats need to distance themselves from this kind of politics. Identity politics never works. And what's so funny about it...
Why doesn't it work?
Because it divides everyone up. It says, you stay in your lane over here, you stay in your lane, we're going to really help you, we'll help the Hispanics, we'll help the gays, we'll help the women, and everyone else is like, what about us? What about us? And then it becomes competing interests. You can only win an election by unity, by saying that we are doing what's best for absolutely everyone. And because the woke movement is essentially a movement that rehabilitates racial thinking, it makes us think about race more, it makes us think about sexuality, and it makes us aware to the point of discrimination, and it separates us all out. And it wants to undo the work of the civil rights movements. It wants to undo the work of Martin Luther King. It wants us no longer to think about content of character, but to think about color of skin. So it's a regressive, backward movement. It isn't helpful for human rights. It feeds the far right. It helps the far right. The far right is on the rise. They're still thankfully a very fringe group, but they are on the rise because of the woke movement, because of the woke left giving them all the ammunition they need. Okay? Because if you constantly say that all these working class white people, you're just privileged, all you boys, you're just rapists in waiting, you've got toxic masculinity, you should be ashamed of yourself, all of this sort of stuff. And then you've got the alt-right, white nationalist group saying, well, come to us then. We're not going to treat you like that.
It becomes an almost moderate and attractive place to be.
Exactly. And that's a really terrifying prospect for me. The main reason I attack the woke left is because I'm scared of the rise of the far right. That genuinely frightens me. Because whereas the woke left are well-intentioned, on the whole, I think they're well-intentioned. They want the world to get a place. They're just in a cult, so they can't see the reality of it, right? It's like anyone in a cult, they believe it, right? It's not evil. They see the world as full of fascists. They see the world as full of injustice, and they want to do something about it. That's a laudable aim. The problem is the world isn't full of fascists, and they just end up hitting people with bike locks because they vote the wrong way, right? So that's the problem. And what all of that does is generate all of this resentment, and it's a gift, it's a boon to the genuine, really vile white supremacist alt-right, just repugnant people who can thrive on this stuff. That's, as far as I can see, the only way to get beyond that is to take down the woke left, to make it okay to mock them again, to restore reasonable political conversation. That's what we need to do. It's so important.
There must be. So there's a really interesting podcast, Eric Weinstein on Joe Rogan,
Okay.
And Eric
I've seen Joe Rogan's podcast a lot, but I haven't seen that.
So
that one.
Eric is the managing director of Thiel Capital, Peter Thiel, one of the PayPal mafia's companies. And he is fairly widely regarded as one of the smartest people, like public intellectuals on the planet. And he has this really interesting point he makes about how the moderates on both the left and the right are allowing the extremists of that side to do all of the work for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that by not shouting up as someone who's moderate left and saying, hang on a second, that's wrong. Or by being moderate right and saying, hang on a second, that's also wrong. Like Charlottesville's wrong.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be. You are, he says it with much more nuance than this, but he says essentially you're supporting it by saying, oh, well, you can go out as the vanguard of your particular political leaning.
Yeah.
Push them forward a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you can't shout louder than the lunatics, can you? They do dominate. They really do. Yeah, I mean, that's a very good, I think, for instance, in the case of Charlottesville, it is quite important for people on that side of the debate to say this is wrong. It's not right for Trump to suggest a moral equivalence between people who are opposed to fascism and people who murder in the name of white supremacy. That's not right. I mean, the anti-fascist peaceful protesters, I'm behind 100%. What I'm not behind is the ones who don the masks, commit acts of violence. That's a very different.
Drag an old man out of his car when they're trying to redirect him in traffic.
Right. That's a very different. It's important because I think peaceful protest is the way all the time. Peaceful protest and ridicule. But yes, certainly. So sorry to go back to the point. Sorry, I've missed it. I've gone on a different.
The extremes pulling in for the moderate people.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to what Bridget was saying, doesn't it? Is that when a movement gets characterized by its worst elements, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that Islam, for instance, has been mischaracterized by its most reactionary elements.
100%.
You get the same thing here, where suddenly you think of the left. I mean, if I say the left, what do you think of? You think of these screeching offence seekers, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
You think of these
purple hair.
Yeah, you think of the worst. Well, actually, that's not what being on the left means. You know, and that's a real shame. So I think we need to restore moderation. I think we need to stop having fealty to ideology so that we can say, broadly speaking, my principles are left wing. But that you've just said, this right winger has said this interesting thing, which I might take on board and actually I might adopt as well.
Mm-hmm.
And restore the nature of the individual. The individual is sovereign, as John Stuart Mill said. Like it matters what you think. You have to be a free thinker, not let other people do your thinking for you.
Mm.
And that's where we've got to, where people don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like if you were on the left, say, and you told me one of your principles, I could pretty much guess what all your other views are. And that should never be the case.
Mm-hmm.
You should surprise me now and then with what you think.
Yeah,